Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a fermenting American cheese slice? No, it's the Film Stories spoiler chat for James Gunn's Superman. I'm James Harvey. I'm joined by Maria Latilla.
Hello.
And Ryan Lambie.
Hello.
To talk about James Gunn's first foray into the DCU, the DC Universe. So, like we said, this is James Gunn and Peter Safran, new co-heads of DC Studios, Warner Bros. Attempt to rejuvenate the DC Comics franchise on the big screen. This is the first film in their new continuity timeline with a few characters left over from the previous ones. It's all very confusing. We'll get into it. The film stars David Corenswet as Superman / Clark Kent, as he comes to terms with his parentage on planet Earth after being sent to Krypton and beginning his tribulations as Superman 3 years after the start of the film. We'll go straight into what we thought in the broadest possible sense. Maria, what did you think of the new Superman?
I was a little mixed, I must say. I came out of the film thinking very much that I could write easily a 2-star review or a 4-star review for this film. If you want to know what I actually wrote, you can go to filmstories.co.uk and read it over there. But
Good plug. Well done, Maria. Good plug.
I know, right? But yeah, I thought, and I could imagine this gets me a lot of criticism online, I think this might be James Gunn's weakest film, which isn't saying much because the man is pretty brilliant and I don't think he's made a bad film. I enjoyed this tremendously. It's just, it's a bit of a mess. Just put it nicely. A very, very enjoyable mess, but a mess nonetheless.
There's good rhyming. And I agree with the messy part. Ryan, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree it was messy. I think it's almost heroic how much he fits into a relatively, by superhero standards, short film. Because it's that's what, shade over 2 hours, isn't it? But I thought it really grew on me. I kind of, for the opening few minutes, I was thinking, I'm not sure I like the dog. I'm not sure I like just how deeply into the weeds it's placed the story. Like, I appreciate the fact that it doesn't rehash the whole origin story of how he came to Earth. And, you know, like, I think most people have an idea of Superman's origins. But it felt like you had to, in your head, you had to catch up with a lot before it even got going. But the more it wound on, the more I kind of appreciated it. And yeah, effectively, it won me over, effectively. I thought in its kind of mixture of kind of goofiness and sincerity, I really appreciated it.
Yeah, I think by the sounds of it, I might be sort of between the two of you, really. Because yeah, I agree. I think the word we're going to say most often in this chat is probably messy. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think we were making notes of the characters before. I got up to 15 sort of main cast that we had to remember the names of, which is going to make this very. I'm going to be looking down at my notes a lot during this. There's a lot of people to remember. But I think there's an awful lot to pack in. I do think there's too. I think you could chop out plenty of sort of characters and subplots and various things, and it would be a much sort of neater film. But yeah, I agree. I think the general vibe of just they're going to throw so much stuff at the wall, and it's all going to be comicsy related, and there's every scene there's a new there's a pocket dimension, there's a giant new kind of alien. They're gonna and just throwing words and names and various very comic booky things at you. That I think in a way it kind of works to make it more accessible, because I think we've got to the stage where everyone knows what sort of comic book stuff is. They're like, that's just a goofy comic book thing. And then they've really lent into the comic book stylings of this so much, where they're just going, don't worry about it. It's a comic book thing. Like, it's a pocket dimension. Like, you know what? You go through a portal and you go in the big scary space. That's fine. That's all you really need to know. Or there's this guy. He's called Mr. Terrific, and he's got big robot balls flying around him. It's kind of cool. They do lasers and stuff. Who really cares? You'll catch up. And I think, yeah, it's a really interesting sort of statement of intent for where the DC universe is going to go, because I think it looks like it's leaning very heavily into the comic roots but in a much more light-hearted, goofy way than potentially on the previous stuff.
But does that then kind of encourage you to be like, oh yeah, never mind. It's fine if you don't know who Mr. Terrific is or who this version of Green Lantern is, just to kind of like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Because I think that's, I don't know. I wonder if I took sort of my mum to watch this, if she would get any kind of enjoyment out of this, because she's not familiar with the comics. I'm not familiar with the comics, but I've seen probably all the other Superman films. So I have a pretty good idea of where we were dropped in the universe, I suppose, because everything's already established. And I had a good idea of where we are. But I don't know how much I like the idea that you're just supposed to kind of wave off like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. That, I don't know. It doesn't really sit right with me a lot of times. Again, really enjoyable. Loved Mr. Terrific. But also, what a bit of a waste in terms of like Hawk Girl. If you cast Isabella Merced, who's brilliant as Dina in The Last of Us Season 2, bloody use her.
She's a very good Dora the Explorer as well. In
I forgot about that.
2019's acclaimed live-action adaptation Dora the Explorer. And, you know, if you're going to hire Dora the Explorer to be a hot girl, yeah, I agree. You should probably use her more.
I did think she got one of the funniest moments in the film, though. I mean, bear in mind, you know, obviously we're talking spoilers, but the bit where she basically hauls the leader of Baravia out of the window, and she's just, it's that shot of her coming through the hallway screaming, and the camera, the lens is slightly too close to her face.
Yeah.
Really made me laugh, and I think that kind of sums up his sort of febrile humour, James Gunn's humour.
Yeah. And the moment that comes a few seconds after that as well, when the president says, "Oh, you're like Superman. You're not gonna kill me," and she goes, "I'm not like Superman," and she just drops him.
Yeah, I thought that was ace. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
And that frame, I think, of her face is now going around social media, and people are comparing it to Wonder Woman, Zack Snyder's Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot. It's like, oh, this is how you present a female superhero, and this is how James Gunn does it. And it's just the shot of her face screaming. I don't know about you, but I will pick that all day, every day.
Yeah.
In you know, because Gal Gadot's Superwoman still kicks ass, but the image that they've mostly used of her is just kind of like her in a very skimpy outfit, and I think that kind of comparison is just so reductive. Both characters are great, well played, but just, yeah, can we stop comparing women and how women are presented in films? Saying as the token woman on this conversation.
I think as well that kind of taps into the difference between the tone of this and the tone of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, Batman, you know, his Justice League, his DC films in general, which is that if you imagine there's like a big dial, and on one side of the dial you have the kind of earnest, goofy, Technicolor comic book angle, and then right on the other you have the mythological, this is Greek myth for the modern era, and everything's very serious. You know, Zack Snyder had it dialed all the way that way, and then, you know, James Gunn's managed to sort of yank it over this way while still sort of keeping, I think, a lot of that kind of mythical quality that you sort of Superman needs. It sort of feels like the film is sort of two halves of his personality kind of butting up against each other. That on one hand you've got that kind of earnestness. I think he genuinely does have that. Like his films do have heart, especially his recent ones like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and The Suicide Squad, for all their kind of goofiness and trashiness. Because I mean, you know, he comes from a background of trauma. He genuinely cares about the characters, and he has a kind of humanistic quality to his writing and his characters. And so you've got that on one side, and then on the other you've got Hawk Girl, sorry, you know, flying through a corridor screaming.
Yeah.
So the film manages to sort of give voice to both sides of his psyche, I suppose. And it doesn't, they don't always sit comfortably, but I think in a way that kind of creates a really interesting friction. It's not all one note like, say, Man of Steel was.
Yeah, I think that's really. I mean, I think we can sort of wind back a bit as well, because you were talking about James Gunn, and I suppose I was wondering what your reactions were when you heard that James Gunn was going to be directing the new Superman. Because for me personally, I thought that his sensibility is almost perfect for the character. I mean, like you were saying, right? I mean, I think his most recent two films, especially Guardian 3 and The Suicide Squad, they have got that clear. I think the one thing that I think I found, especially in Guardians 3, is it's something that you really realize, you don't realize has been missing from a lot of recent superhero films until he does it, which is people saving people. Like in Guardians 3, like the whole final, I mean, spoiler alert for Guardians Volume 3, if you've not seen that, but if the whole third act set piece is rescuing a load of mistreated animals from a big exploding spaceship, and you sort of, and I think when it happened, I realized, oh, through all Avengers Endgame, through all the Man of Steel, both DC and Marvel, there's just been such a lack of people being good, like people doing nice things, and superheroes being heroes first and super second almost.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's a real, that seems to be the real heart of this film. I mean, James Gunn's been saying enough in interviews that his Superman is just a nice person. And yeah, so I was wondering how well, Maria, how well did you think sort of the James Gunn? You said you thought it was his weakest film, which I don't think I disagree with potentially, but yeah, how well do you think he suits sort of the Superman tone in general?
I mean, it's a bold choice to get James Gunn, who in recent years has very much done that kind of ragtag team of heroes who don't really want to be heroes. You know, in Suicide Squad, they're obviously all kind of traditionally villains, and even Guardians of the Galaxy, they're kind of, you know, on the outskirts of the heroism that we normally see in these kinds of films. I think visually, he's a very strong director, and I do think this film looks very good. I do wish that he leaned a little bit more into the genres where he started his career with Slither, for example, or even Super. I kind of want him to go back to that, but I do understand that this is much more mainstream. There's a lot more money involved. You have to kind of guarantee that this has some mainstream appeal. But I think it was an inspired choice. And I do wonder if he's so used to making films about big groups of people. Is that why we got sort of Justice Gang here as well, so that he could have that group dynamic and that playfulness between different characters, rather than just have Superman at the front and center and then have, you know, Lois Lane as his romantic interest. Although this Lois Lane is so much more than that, and I really appreciated it. And then have Lex Luthor as the villain. So yeah, I thought it was an inspired choice, but I didn't see him as a natural fit quite that soon when it was announced. But, you know, I do like James Gunn, so, and in no means is this a bad film, I don't think. So I think he pulled it off for the most part in terms of at least visuals and kind of themes.
Yeah, I do think there's a few bits where the James Gunniness of it all does kind of come. I think, yeah, like you said, the Justice Gang. I think as much as Mr. Terrific was, I think, a real highlight. I think the scene that everyone will be talking about is when he arrives at Lex Luthor's base, and it does the very James Gunn Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 credit scene of Baby Groot being everyone protecting Baby Groot as they're fighting a giant octopus monster, and a 80s pop song is playing. It does that with Noah and the whale in the background. And that felt to me, even as I was watching it, thinking, "Oh, this is a very James Gunny moment." It is also quite cool, but yeah, I think that came through. And then, yeah, like you said, I think as cool as Mr. Terrific is, the Justice Gang really, I think, didn't need to be in it. Particularly, I think it's just a few too characters too many, and yeah, I don't know if this is just me, sort of, you know, trying to put things into the film in an unfair way, thinking like, oh, I would rather watch this film. But I really wanted more of the Daily Planet stuff, and I really wanted to see a bit more of Lois Lane, and I think especially a bit more of Skylar Gizondo's Jimmy Olsen, because I am possibly the world's biggest fan of Booksmart, which Olivia Wilde's debut, where he plays this rich kid who throws a party on a yacht that nobody comes to and just wants everyone to like him and makes t-shirts of his face in them. He's so good in that. And then when he appeared again in Licorice Pizza with Paul Thomas Anderson, he's in it for about 30 seconds and completely steals, for me, the entire film. And so when he's announced as Jimmy Olsen, I was really excited. And then it kind of feels like he, along with the rest of the Daily Planet people, gets left behind because there's so many characters for them to introduce.
But Skylar Gizundo, he was fan cast as well. Like there was loads of sort of Reddit threads before his casting was announced or even probably kind of thought about that people wanted him to be Jimmy Olsen, and then it just kind of materialized, didn't it?
Yeah.
Also, at least this film does actually have a Jimmy Olsen, because I don't know if anyone remembers Batman v Superman. There was a character in that got dealt very short shrift. And I didn't even realise it was meant to be him until I saw the end credits, and it listed an actor as Jimmy Olsen. I was like, oh wow, boy, that's harsh. I mean, I can tell you one thing for certain: if Zack Snyder had directed this film, he would have killed that dog in the first 20 minutes. There is no
Poor
way.
Crypto.
Yeah,
No.
that dog would have been toast.
Yeah. Well, you said you found the dog annoying at the start, Ryan. What did
I just felt
did
like
it grow on you?
I think what it was you got the opening, the words on the screen. My brain's fried. I can't remember what you would call those words on a screen, but that came up, and that was sort of supposed to get you up to speed. And I felt like my brain was going, right, okay, so we're here. And then it felt like it took ages for the dog to just show up and drag him to the Fortress of Solitude, because you sort of knew what was I could sort of clock what was going to happen. And the dog was just so kind of anarchic and destructive in some of those earlier scenes. I was just kind of like, oh my God, if we've got 2 hours of this dog just tearing stuff up, this is just going to annoy me. And that, like, it's that kind of like, oh, is the whole film just going to have this same kind of wacky tone, But like I say, it just kind of won me over. I think the quality of the characters, like you said, I mean, Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnan was really good, and I thought there was actual genuine chemistry between her and David Corenswet's Superman in a way that I've not seen since the original 4 films. I mean, does anybody even remember the sort of Brandon Routh, Bryan Singer Superman that was
We've all tried
basically
to forget it.
Yeah, it was basically trying to be a Richard Donner tribute act, I think. And I just don't remember it very well at all. I know I saw it in the cinema. But anyway, yeah, I digress. But yeah, so yeah, I thought there was a real heart there. The only thing I'd say about James Gunn is that sometimes in his keenness to kind of elicit emotions from you, drag emotions out of the audience, he can be a little bit cheap. I don't know. I saw this in a relatively empty screening room cinema. But there's the scene in the kind of pocket universe where Superman's in prison, and Luther's got a random Asian American guy just tied to a chair that Superman spoke to once, and he just kind of shoots him in the head. And I just sort of thought, in the context of the film, that just kind of feels a bit much, like horrible, kind of mean-spirited. And I get it, you need to establish the kind of, how far does your villain go in his villainy kind of thing. Films have that, but I thought Guardians of the Galaxy 3 got a little bit harsh when it came to animal cruelty, and it felt like it was trying to kind of press buttons in a way. But that's not me saying, that sort of detracts from the film overall, but in that moment, it just kind of felt like, geez, that's a bit much, isn't it? I don't know what anybody else thought of that. Maybe it's just me.
It needed more of it, I think, then, because I thought that was a great moment where you really saw Lex Luthor's villainy. Because apart from that, like, he's mostly just been in his kind of like base, telling people what to do, and there's loads of computers. But yeah, it needed more of that. Because
more innocent people being shot in the head.
Exactly. I wanted more people to be shot in the head. I want to go on record with that. No, but yeah, it needed more moments like that, whether it was someone getting shot in the head, but somewhere where we saw just how insane this Lex Luthor is, because he's so obsessed with Superman, and I think Nicholas Hoult really sells it. But then I want to see more of that. I don't want to see him just giving people orders, like what moves to throw at Superman. I wanted to see that Lex Luthor, because it's so much more interesting than, say, Jesse Eisenberg's from the Zack Snyder film.
Yeah, I think that not to throw too much shade on Jesse Eisenberg, who I love very much, but that is not a high bar. But yeah, so you think there should be a bit more light and shade, maybe? Because I would agree, maybe that because the general tone of goofy, happy funness, I suppose, could sort of be a little overwhelming at times. The thing that I would potentially push back on at that is, I think the reason it almost worked better for me was because, and this is where we're going to get controversial, is because the film feels really, really surprisingly political for what could well be the biggest film of the year. The early box office stuff is anything to go by, or at least one of the biggest films of the year. It's definitely, there's so much riding on it for Warner Brothers that it felt so strange that, and welcome, I suppose, that James Gunn and everyone were able to draw so many real world parallels. Because I think part of the reason that I understood Lex Luthor to be really evil was because of the real world context, where you can think, oh, this is so much like Elon Musk or one of the other terrifying billionaires that we've got flying around in private jets. That you sort of, that context means, oh, I know he's evil because what he's doing now, when he talks about he wants to build a technological utopia, you sort of go, where have I heard that before? And it reminds you that because it reminds you of terrible things that are happening in the real world. It's almost like you don't necessarily need him to show that he's being evil by doing wanton acts of cruelty. You almost know, oh, he's evil because he's like this evil guy in the real world. And also he doesn't like crypto, which...
Yeah, that's what I felt. I thought, like, just the fact that he kidnapped his dog immediately singled him out as a rotter. And also the fact that he basically, his plan is, it's another real estate plan from Luthor, because in the original 78 Superman, he basically wants to sink the entire the western seaboard so that he can
he wants to sink the
seaside
west coast
community.
so that his useless land becomes beachfront property, which is a really funny plot, actually.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then in this one, there's echoes of that, because they basically want to turn Jahanpur, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but this kind of very poor nation, he wants to basically turn it into a big resort, which is exactly what Trump wants to do, or has suggested he wanted to do with Gaza Strip. So there's a kind of parallel there. So I guess Superman films always have some sort of, they sit within a context. Like the 78 Superman, I think worked so well, a bit like Star Wars did, because it came at the tail end of a decade where so many films were so cynical and dark, and that sort of Nixon era. And Superman was just like the 360 opposite of that. It was a positive vision of America. And then, like, as I said, I can't remember enough about the 2006 Superman to tell you anything about that, so gloss over that one. But Man of Steel felt very much like a post 9/11, post war in the Middle East, America asking itself, what sort of superpower does it want to be? Does it want to be a benign dictator like Superman that sort of has the ultimate power but uses it benevolently, or does it want to be like Zod, where it's this black-clad dictator monster? And in this, it sort of almost feels, I think the thing that moved me about this one is it almost felt like a kind of appeal to our better nature, if you like. It always feels like, can we stop spreading poison and spread kindness instead? That was kind of like the sentiment I came away from this with, which I found actually quite moving.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just getting old and soft, but...
No, the bit that I found really moving, actually, and I think actually this is the bit that's sold me on David Corn's threat of Superman, because I don't think I was sure on him at that point. It's when he's having the interview with Lois near the start, and he's getting more and more frustrated and more angry. And she says, well, why did you do this? Because of all these repercussions or whatever. And he just screams at her that people were going to die. And I thought, oh, that's such a really succinct way of summing up who this Superman is, where he's just, all he wants to do is save people. Like, he's just so minutely focused. I mean, in a battle later on, he saves a squirrel from a giant rampaging kaiju. And it was just such a good encapsulation of, oh, this is who Superman is. He's just good. And I think people have always, it's a popular opinion that Superman's boring because he's just, oh, he's a goody two-shoes nice guy in a cape. But I think, yeah, like you said, in the context that we're in now, that feels radical to be someone who is just focused on making their immediate surroundings as pleasant as possible and just doing the, doing the right thing, sort of screw the consequences, almost.
But
And
also, that
yeah,
I don't think he even really thought them through. I think that
Yeah.
what appealed to me about this version of the character is he, like the Christopher Reeve one, was brilliant because he both brought that kind of poise that he naturally had because he's from quite a privileged background, Christopher Reeve. So he had that kind of Princeton sort of dignity to him. But then he could play the kind of goofiness, like his physical performance as Clark Kent was incredible. But Corin Sweat, what he brings to it is that he's not necessarily that smart. He's very boyish, he's very naive, and there's something, and there's not an ounce of kind of guile or calculatedness in him. And I think whatever he does is just him trying to do the right thing in the moment. He's not thinking multiple steps ahead, like saving the squirrel. And like when he's fighting the giant lizard monster kaiju thingy, he's actually trying to prevent collateral damage, which in the wake of a lot of other superhero films, it again feels almost quite revolutionary. It's like,
Yeah.
he's actually trying to prevent skyscrapers being knocked over. I almost feel like James Gunn might have set the pace for superhero films inadvertently, because obviously he made Guardians 3, he left Marvel and he's gone to do DC. But then since then you've had Thunderbolts, and Thunderbolts, although it doesn't, I'm not saying it kind of copies his humor or anything like that, but one thing it does, which you mentioned Guardians 3 does, is that it has its characters actually rescue people. And it very pointedly does the opposite of the Avengers, where it's set in sort of, like, there's a big battle sequence which is set at the foot of the building where the Battle of New York took place. And in the Battle of New York, they're all kind of just off, like fighting different enemies, and shit's getting blown up all over the place. And there's not really much thought given to like collateral damage or people, saving people. But in this, they very pointedly have a shot where they kind of group together and they push a big bit of concrete out of the way to protect some people, and the crowd claps. And that's sort of, I feel that's kind of like a bit of a Gun thing in a way. That's sort of like that kind of collective. Like I think the reason that he likes to have these gangs of misfits together is because I don't think he necessarily particularly believes in this idea that Marvel films and DC films had up until now, which is that really it's about individuals. It's about the individual, and you might be in a group, but you're not doing things collectively to try and make the world a better place. And I think that's something that this film has, and I think not uncoincidentally that was also in Thunderbolts. So I sort of wonder, between those and then Fantastic Four coming up, that seems to have quite a kind of almost retro, upbeat tone to it, whether this is kind of like the way superhero films are going, sort of away from that kind of cynical.
The way you said that Man of Steel kind of represents where the world was around that time, post 9/11. This very much represents where we are now then, what you say with the kind of group effort and making sure that everyone's okay. I think that's very much where we are right now, and that's really heartfelt and really nice. But then, we still have the Lex Luthors or the Elon Musks of the world and Donald Trumps of the world. And the question is, how much reality do we want in these films? Do we want them to be escapism? Do we want them to be completely removed from our own kind of reality so that we can escape our potentially quite depressing current place of the world and state of the world? Or do we want them to reflect what's going on in the world, and that maybe we could have a Superman and a Hawk Girl and a Green Lantern and a Mr. Terrific and Lois Lane. Lois Lane does a lot of saving in this film, and I really appreciate that. So I don't know where we stand with that. What do you guys think? Do you want your superhero films to be realistic, or as realistic as they can be, with flying people around?
Yeah, I actually thought this film struck a really nice balance, because it is, I think, one thing that I have found not upsetting, but I think disappointing with a lot of recent, not just superhero films, sort of blockbusters in general, is how divorced from politics and the real world they are. I mean, it sounds like a completely unrelated tangent, but if you think about when you're walking around in the real world, people are using their mobile phones all the time and they're vaping. And I sound like this is my old man shouts at cloud moment. But then you don't see those in films. Like, you don't see, apart from in Conclave, which does have vaping cardinals, which is very good, but you don't see people using their phones. You don't see people using social media. You don't see people vaping, etc. And it feels like for a really long time, Hollywood's almost been stuck in a pre-2016 world. And it was really refreshing watching this, seeing a film. I mean, like something like 28 years later, it came out a couple of months ago, seeing films that really clearly reflect the time that they're made in a much more sort of interesting and nuanced way. But then at the same time, in this, you do have lots of incredibly bright colors and cosmic mumbo jumbo and people flying dogs, etc. Yeah, like I thought it was I thought actually that was the balance that struck best, was balancing the fun with sort of a real heart and a political, not even a political message, just the radical idea of, wouldn't it be better if we were kind to each other? It's a message. Yeah, I don't know what you think, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I'd go with that. And also, I think the interesting thing about this film is that it's about a battle of reputations. There's an awful lot going in this. It's actually one of those sort of weird films where if you actually strip the plot right down, it's not that kind of arcane. But because he's piling so many things on top of each other, it kind of seems a bit more confusing than it is. But one of the things that's going on is the battle of reputations. So you've got Lex Luthor, who desperately wants to be loved by the whole world and recognized for the genius that he is, which, has parallels with a certain someone who owns a social media platform. But you also have Superman, who is universally beloved by everybody until these secrets from his past are dredged up. It's essentially somebody's gone through his old tweets and they've found some really dark material in his old tweets, and they've cancelled him, which interestingly James Gunn has experience with. So I'm not sure if he was consciously drawing on that or not. So it's about Superman rebuilding his reputation, and then of course Lex Luthor gets his ultimate comeuppance, which is not just that he doesn't get to defeat Superman, but it is that he's disgraced. He becomes a pariah. His infinite monkey cage of tweeters, came to nothing. I really like that detail, by the way.
I love that detail.
The
I love that
infinite monkeys typing. Yeah, I thought that was kind of wonderful. So yeah, I think this does. I think it does a difficult balancing act of both reflecting 2025, but without being pretentious about it and without kind of drawing its attention to itself in a kind of, oh, look at me, I'm being so current and clever kind of way. And I think like this, for example, the Eve Tessmacher thing, where she's this kind of, you almost think it's a background gag at first, where she's constantly taking selfies, and you sort of think, oh, is this his slightly old manish comment about, the vapidity of youth, or, Instagram culture? And then of course it has this payoff, which is that actually she's really smart and she's been secretly taking espionage pictures, basically to knacker Lex Luthor if she ever needed it. That's kind of example of how kind of cleverly he could weave these things into his stories without kind of going, oh, look at me, aren't I clever, kind of thing. It's all done so kind of casually. And I think as well, that the last thing I'll say on this is that it's hard to make a superhero film, I think, with this sort of money and project your personality into it. I think you could name a dozen superhero films, which are perfectly fine, but you don't necessarily get the voice or the personality of the person who made it. And I think one compliment you can give James Gunn is, even if you don't necessarily like everything that he does, or like his sensibility, he has a sensibility, and it will not be sanded off or, entirely by a studio or having a huge budget or a 12A certificate. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of,
yeah.
I think that's to be commended just by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one sort of Well, it's sort of related to that. I think 'cause again, these were characters that kind of got not necessarily a short shrift, but they weren't in it very often. But it's Ma and Pa Kent, who only sort of appear very briefly, which I suppose is really more a testament because they're starting a bit later than Superman origin stories usually do. But I think the people that they've cast, who I have written down here somewhere, it is Privet Taylor Vince and Neva Howell. Neither of whom are big names, I'd say, in any sense. I mean, I think Taylor Vince has been sort of a character actor in a few things, but far from, we've come a long way from Kevin Costner as
Diane Lane.
yeah.
Yeah.
And but they felt much more authentic. Like they didn't feel like Hollywood people. They didn't feel like these were cast by a casting agency. They felt like genuine, really quite sort of strong and authentic sounding Southern American sort of Kansas-ish accents that just felt so far removed from the sort of smooth and stylized versions of those characters that I've seen before. And yeah, I think that was a really nice indication of the heart that James Gunn was trying to get into the film, was sort of casting these sort of more ordinary people in such sort of iconic roles.
And that scene on the veranda as well between him and Superman and Pa Kent, he's eating cereal barefoot, and then I think Pa Kent gives him this kind of pep talk about basically saying you're not your parents, you're your own person, and it doesn't really matter what their intentions for you coming here were. It's up to you what you do. That much better written than that, but that's
that was basically it. I think. I mean, you got it word for word.
That was just fantastic. Yeah, and I liked as well that when you saw sort of incidental moments of sort of people around the city, like you get the usual sort of fleeing in terror moments that you get in sort of disaster movies, but then there are always sort of people like clutching their pet terror pin, or there's a fireman running off with a saving a little girl and stuff like that. Again, it kind of gets to that kind of very humanistic, it's sort of looking at the people at their best rather than their worst. Again, it's quite a contrast from there's a moment in Batman v Superman where, and it's a scene where Superman's I think he prevents a space capsule from crashing into Earth. I think it's something like that. He prevents some sort of disaster from happening, and it's in the trailers. It's like one of those trailer moments, but like he's standing there, and everyone's hands all come out to try and touch Superman like he's Jesus or something.
Yeah,
and Superman just has this kind of slightly sad expression, like, "Oh God, do I really have to live on this planet with these flesh tubes?" Like that incarnation of Superman did not really want to rescue people. It was just such a burden to have to save lives, and can't people just take care of themselves? God, like you imagine just sitting there with an Ayn Rand book, going, "Yeah, spot on. What am I even doing here?" I think it's pleasing to have a film that is not that.
Yeah.
I wanted more Martin Parr Kent. I think on paper they're cute, but I thought, especially earlier on in the film, they just came across as like a kind of like a comic relief. And I would have much rather seen more of them and their relationship with Clark over, like we've already said, Justice Gang. Didn't really add that much to the film. And I just thought they were kind of short-handed, like, I don't know. I wanted more of them. Otherwise, I thought, they've got such strong accents that, yeah, they came as a bit too comical for me, sort of across.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I mean, especially when the film in general is trying, like, its central thesis is supposed to be, it doesn't matter who you're, like, it's about parentage and about Superman's sort of relationship. I think it probably did need more Ma and Pa Kent type, just for the moment right at the end when he says, "Oh, he's watching a video of his parents, he finds it soothing." It was a really sweet moment, but I think it would have hit so much harder if we had seen a little bit more of Ma and Pa Kent and knew sort of what their values were, I suppose. Just a bit more evidence, because they like you say, they were a little bit comical and a little bit just sort of a nice old couple. But I think if we'd had a bit more evidence of them, I don't know, they could rescue a squirrel, or they could say, "Oh, we look after and insert animal here. I'm just going by animal shorthand. So that seems to be James Gunn's approach to films at the moment as well, is shortcut to empathy is put a cute animal in there. But yeah, I think maybe if they'd had a bit more screen time, I think you're right. I think it would have hit a little bit harder. But yeah, so speaking of needing more Kents, if we didn't get a lot of Clark Kent in this film, I think part of that comes from because Lois Lane already knows who he is. Whenever they're together alone, he is sort of Superman, really, because I think there's much less of a there's less of a sense that they are that Clark Kent is his real face and then Superman's like an alias. It's no, Superman is who he is for 99% of the screen time. But yeah, one controversial thing that they brought in from the comics that I wasn't a huge fan of was he's got hypno glasses. What did you two think of the hypno glasses?
I thought it was such a kind of background grace note that it was just mentioned in passing that it kind of washed over me, really. I didn't mind it either way. Right.
I thought, I don't know. I don't mind it, but yeah, if we had more Clark Kent and we kind of saw them a little more, maybe I would have been sold on them. But like Ryan said, it kind of, I didn't even remember them initially until someone asked me about it. It's like, oh, is he doing hypno glasses? Oh, damn, yeah, he is. And I think what's so brilliant about Christopher Reeve's Superman is that you see the difference between Clark Kent and Superman, even without the glasses. That famous scene where he, flies off after taking Lois Lane on a nice little, not even a stroll around, just a fly around the city. And then he comes through the door as Clark Kent, and you see it. He's thinking whether or not he should reveal his identity as Superman. And you see him take off the glass and like, up. And then you see him kind of go down, and his whole body language changes. So I think I would have liked to see more of that. But in general, my problem with, it feels wrong to say my problem with David Corenswet, because this is not his fault at all, is I feel like there's so much plot going on that we didn't see much development in Superman. We didn't get him to really explore the character outside of the main conflict of the film. So in short, I wanted more Clark Kent in general and see the difference between those two characters. Because for me, that's half the fun in a Superman film specifically. And I was cheated out of that. Not happy.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And it is definitely my time to, this is I've shoehorned in the hypno glasses, it's time for me to get on my soapbox and complain about them. So I've been rewatching the Christopher Reeve Supermans. I've been rewatching the Christopher Reeve Supermans recently, and I think there's so much lightness and comedy in them, and I think a lot of that comes from, I think, like you say, in that difference that he has between Clark Kent with the glasses and without, and also the level of suspension of disbelief. I think it's so fun and continually funny that nobody recognizes him. Nobody recognized that Clark Kent is Superman just because he's wearing glasses. I think that is such a great running gag. And I think if you were sitting down with a script for a Superman film and going, which of these options is more fun, capital F fun, entertaining, comedic, whatever, is it more fun that he has glasses that hypnotize everyone so that his face looks different so no one's going to recognize him as Superman, whatever? Or is it more fun to imagine a world where just because he's wearing glasses and acts like a nerd, nobody knows that the mild-mannered reporter is the most famous man on the planet? Like, which one of those is a more entertaining pattern? I think you would always settle on it's more fun if everyone just pretends that they can't recognize him. And I think that was potentially something that I thought was missing. And it always annoys me when it's kind of the sort of cinema sins method of film criticism almost, where people are obsessed with avoiding and criticizing plot holes and things like, oh, well, that's not very realistic because obviously people will recognize. It's like, just shut up. A man's flying and there's a giant fire-breathing lizard attacking a city that doesn't exist, and there's someone who can turn their hand into a rock. Like, it's all made up and it's all silly. And I think there's enough of the goofy tone that in the rest of the film that I would have liked a few more moments maybe of that sort of thing. I mean, I think we were talking before the recording started as well. I know you mentioned this, Ryan, where we didn't get a he takes off the shirt to reveal the Superman logo moment, or any quick changes. He never ran into a revolving door and then came out the other side in a cape, because we don't see much Clark Kent. And yeah, I think that and the glasses for me are sort of linked, and I would like more of the slightly camp silliness that we've got in previous outings.
Yeah, I'd go with that. And I think the other thing, when I sort of said at the top of this about, sort of feeling like I was trying to catch up with the plot, I think what it needed was that they talked about him preventing the war in the invasion, and I think we needed to see it, even if it was just like for a few seconds, because I think it would have been so much more effective, obviously in that kind of screenwriting show don't tell type way, if you'd have seen it rather than them having a conversation about it. I think as well it would have helped ground you in the story of like, oh, these are the stakes. This is what it's about, because you don't necessarily, because it is a conversation, part of a wider conversation. You don't necessarily realise that that's kind of later on in the film that becomes kind of key. The invasion, and that's all part of Lex Luthor's plan, and all the rest of it. And because when you do eventually see how poor Johan Poor is, and I think you needed that earlier on. But yeah, I think that's a side effect of him sort of cramming as much as he did in a relatively short, by modern standards, superhero film.
I think we wanted more Clark Kent, but I also wanted more just Daily Planet. Again, just like Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, if you're going to cast a character actor like Wendell Pierce as Perry White, I want to see that. But what did, and this might fall under the whole CinemaSins type of film criticism, what did make me a little bit stressed out is them typing this massive article exposing Lex Luthor on a spaceship and publishing it, no editing, the
I
more
don't know, that bit's accurate.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's stressful. Like, I understand that we would do that because we're writing about films, but that's a
No.
huge. There has to be a lawyer reading through it, and someone has to like look it, and you presumably need images, like all the stuff that isn't particularly sexy about our job. But no, that gave me a little bit of stress watching them kind of do this major thing, even if the world is, about to end potentially. Like, come on, it's a bloody spaceship. Like, get to a desk,
Well,
and type it out properly.
actually, I thought, because I was thinking about this, and when they fly off in the spaceship at the end, when the Daily Planet offers is going to get destroyed by the giant black hole rift that's coming up, there's a group of them. There's Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane. There's, what's her name? Cat Grant, I think I looked up her name was. Who's the woman with the big glasses who is around and gets about 2 lines. And then there's also a random other man who I don't think has barely any speaking lines or whatever, but he seems to be the only other person that they felt was integral enough to the plot to be in the spaceship. My theory is he's the lawyer that then had to read over what they'd written, what Jimmy Olsen had written, to make sure he wasn't defaming Lex Luthor. And also, this has frustrated me about online discourse. People have been bashing Jimmy Olsen for writing directly into the CMS, which is the Daily Planet's very easy to use looking sort of interface, like Wix or WordPress or whatever. But he doesn't actually, from when I was watching it, because I was looking out for it before I saw the film, and when I saw it, what actually happens is you just see Perry White passes him back the laptop and says, "That's good, Jimmy, well done, hit publish," and then you see him hit publish. But what that means is that he's potentially written it up in a Word document, someone's proofed it, then he's sent it, this is getting very inside baseball, then he's copied it into the CMS, done all of the SEO, Yoast, this is so inside baseball, extra stuff and all the keywords and things and the images, and then he's passed it back to his editor for a final proofread, which I think is good journalism, actually. And it's the first time, I think, that a superhero film has led to a debate on good journalism practices in the practical sense of SEO and CMS then.
The unsexy part of our job.
The unsexy, well, meant to you, I find them very sexy. Again, so we've been whittling on for long enough. So I suppose we should finish with sort of thoughts about where the DCU is potentially going to go in the future. I mean, we got a sneak peek at the end of Millie Alcock as Supergirl. This, like I think I said at the start, this does feel like a statement of intent for this is the tone that they're going for in the DCU. We've got Supergirl and Clayface coming next year. Are we excited? Are we looking forward to the reign of our new DC overlords? Do you think it's going to be the new Marvel?
I think they think it's going to be the new Marvel. I think that's what David Zaslav, who's the head of Warner Brothers film, I think he wants it to be. I'm hoping they won't follow that same recipe to a T. I'm really excited for Clayface because it seems like they're really leaning into the horror. You've got Mike Flanagan writing it and James Watkins directing it. So I'm hoping that they will bring more of those genre elements and they will go a bit further than Marvel did. Marvel absolutely kind of paved the way. So now I hope that DC experiments with it. So I'm excited and I'm hoping that they will reward that excitement.
Ryan, what do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think what I liked about this is that it doesn't feel like an advert for other movies. Like, you know, having the Justice Gang, you know, they were sort of treated and so casually that it didn't feel like they were sort of cynically trying to set up some sort of spin-off adventure for them, even though they possibly could. I think there's been talk about like a TV series, isn't there? Certainly for the Daily Planet or something. But it didn't feel like it was an exhausting series of trailers for other things that are coming to you soon. Even the sort of introduction of Supergirl was treated more just as a kind of gag of her being this kind of 90s wild child who's been partying on other planets. That didn't feel like a Nick Fury moment, if you like, which I found heartening. So I hope that whatever they do with the future films, that they are kind of similarly kind of loose and that they just try and tell stories rather than try and tell me about other stories that may or may not be made in 3 years' time. I feel like I've had that for so long in films that, you know, in superhero films, that I'm kind of ready for just self-contained stories again, rather than a universe.
Yeah, I think in a strange way, it almost felt like it did feel like some of the later stage Marvel stuff where you don't have to have specific team up films. People will just turn up in each other's films. That you'll have War Machine will turn up in the Captain America TV series or that sort of thing, or Doctor Strange will appear in what did Doctor Strange appear in? Thor. And there is that sort of level of that sort of comic style level of everyone's just in the same world and they'll just casually come in. But yeah, I agree. I mean, Supergirl coming in at the end felt so casual. It was just sort of like, oh, here's Supergirl. Hello.
It wasn't like in Batman v Superman where Ben Affleck literally sits down and watches some trailers for Wonder Woman and The Flash and a bunch of other things. At least he did not do that.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think I do agree with you, Maria. I think I don't know if it felt revolutionary enough to completely revive the superhero genre, which I think is very much still potentially not as big as it was 10 years ago. I think just instinctively, based on not a lot at all, it feels like we've come it feels like when Wonder Woman came out and made $1 billion, I feel like we're quite a long way away from that. And I don't know if Supergirl coming out next year is going to have quite the same sort of impact as that film did. Clayface, I definitely can't see it being a sort of similarly huge blockbuster. But yeah, I think I from evidence of this though, it does, like you say, Ryan, I think it does seem like we could be en route to having a bunch of fun, very loosely connected superhero films in the DC universe that are a fun time at the movies and not necessarily leading to something big and exciting. But yeah, I don't think we've got MCU 2.0 on the hands just instinctively.
No, it didn't feel like James Gunn was really trying to kind of knock it out of the park, if you know what I mean, with some sort of incredible all-time great. I think it's like, let's just make it just fun, just have fun with it kind of thing. It's kind of, Like, casual is the word.
Yeah. Casual and messy. That's our verdict on Superman. And with that, I think that's about time to end. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Maria and Ryan for joining me. If you want more content from Film Stories, where we all work, you can head to filmstories.co.uk. We've got regular features, news, reviews, articles, all sorts of goodness on the latest in film, TV, and occasionally a little bit of video game stuff as well. If you want to listen to more things, you can go to Film Stories Podcast Network. We've got all sorts of shows on all of the above, really. Anything nerdy, anything filmy, that sort of thing. We've got loads of different shows on there, so you're bound to find something that you'll love. We've also got the Film Stories with Simon Brew podcast, which is some in-depth looks at film history of specific films, and alongside interviews with filmmakers as well. That is all from me, so I'm going to say goodbye from myself, James Harvey.
And a goodbye from me, Maria Lattila, and I will see you next time.
Bye from me, Mr. Ryan Lambie.
Yes, very good. A very smooth ending. And should I say goodbye from me again? I'll say goodbye from me again, because that feels like the way these things are supposed to end. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you need to redo the ending?
I don't know. John,
Or is that fine?
I don't
did you
think
hear
so.
that, John? Sorry?
Keep it in, double it. Okay. Okay, that works. Okay. So, I think we caught them all with verandas.
Yeah,
Three
there's
anyway.
what, 2, 3? Yeah.
Yeah.